A big shout out to all of those who submitted some suggestions for podcast episodes. We have a few really good things lined up for you over the next few months. If there's anything you want to learn more about, or you're curious, or a question you want to ask, love to hear your feedback. I do read all the emails, and I'm really keen to hear what's working for you, what you'd like to learn more about, topics, things of interest out there in the social work profession. So in today's episode, I chat with Louise Hayes, and she's an ACT practitioner, so ACT as in acceptance and commitment therapy, and she's also a trainer, and she's written a few really helpful books for young people and for clinicians as well. So you can get all that information on her website, and I'll link to that in the show notes. So without further ado, here is my interview with Louise Hayes. Welcome to the Inside Social Work podcast, Louise. Did you want to tell us a bit about yourself for the audience listening out there?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me, Marie. So I am a clinical psychologist, and I primarily work with young people, but I also work with adults as well. And I've spent the last, I don't know, however many years developing treatments around acceptance and commitment therapy.
Wonderful. So a lot of our listeners are graduates or early career social workers and sometimes other allied health professionals. They might not know what acceptance and commitment therapy is. So could you give us a bit of an idea of what it is and who it's good for?
Sure. Well, it's called ACT, mostly ACT, not acceptance and commitment therapy. And they have this weird thing, Marie, that you're not allowed to call it ACT, right? You have to call it ACT. And its roots came from behaviour therapy. And it's like a CBT can't just stay CBT forever. So then we ended up with ACT. It's kind of just like that progression that happens. And it's a way of doing therapy that is really interested lots of people outside of psychology. So there's lots of social workers that do it. We even have a social work special interest group around using ACT for social workers. But it's also used by teachers and coaches and workplaces. And so even though it's like originally called acceptance and commitment therapy, it's actually often referred to as acceptance and commitment training, and is used in lots and lots of different places, pretty much everywhere where humans are and where they hurt. And in a nutshell, ACT can be described really easily, right? It's trying to help people do what they care about, even when their thoughts and feelings say this will be hard. Because that's the key to life. Learning to be able to do what you care about is the thing that brings us life.
Yeah, there's been quite a few self-help books that are ACT focused.
Yeah.
So I think a few that I recommend with people is, like the Reality Slap and the Happiness Trap and a few of Russ Harris's books. Do you have a few others that you recommend that work with different populations or age groups?
Sure. Well, I can talk about the ones that I do. So there's a couple that we have written. My co-author Joseph Cherokee and I have written on using ACT for young people. And so we have written a book called The Thriving Adolescent and another one called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life for Teenagers. And we have a new one, which is our best one yet, and I'm so excited about it. It's coming out in September. It's all finished, but we still have to wait for it to be on a piece of paper. It's coming out in September, and it's written for young people, and it's called Your Life, Your Way. And without a doubt, it's the best thing we've done. Your life, your way. And so what I like about it is it's written for young people to be able to read. But truthfully, we know that lots of young people are not going to pick up a book and read it about their own thoughts and feelings, because even adults don't do that. So we've written it in such a way that a practitioner could pick it up and be able to use that language to work with young people. So it's kind of like we expect practitioners will read it, but if they want to, they can. It's in the language of a young person. So
excellent. So the first two, The Thriving Adolescent and Get Out of Your Mind, they're for practitioners.
Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life for Teens is a book that was written for teenagers, and that's a bestseller. It's been around for 8-10 years now, and that's kind of an easy read for people to pick up. And The Thriving Adolescent is a practitioner book, and it's actually a developmental model of acceptance and commitment therapy. So my co-author Jo and I, we spent about 5 years working out a developmental model, a way of looking at ACT and doing it for development. So, and that inside that is the developmental model of ACT that we call DNAV. DNAV is being used across the world in big trials, research trials, and in schools, and developing school curriculums, and all of this really exciting stuff on learning how to use ACT with children and adolescents. It's kind of fun.
So what makes ACT different to CBT?
Well, that's an interesting, it's a funny question. So, because then they're kind of different, but they're not kind of different. So what makes it different, I guess, is history. So first there was behaviour therapy, which is, the basic, began with things like understanding antecedent behaviour consequence, that stuff, like that we can reinforce things and shape things. And then came CBT, which added the cognitive component to behaviour therapy, which just added the ability, the talk part, if you like, to behaviour therapy. There were some things inside CBT that some of the ACT people felt were not doing the job that we wanted. And so the founders of ACT, which is Steve Hayes and Kelly Wilson and Kirk Strausel, they started to add on to ACT from CBT some ways of looking at language that were flexible and fluid. So if I make that simple, in a nutshell, CBT traditionally, the cognitive therapy part focused on kind of like information processing. Like humans are like a machine. Information goes in and then thoughts come out. And there's a right way to think, if that makes sense. I'm being crude in the explanation, but that kind of helps it. Whereas ACT came along with a different approach from information processing, and instead said everything that a human thinks and feels occurs in a context, and that context is critical, and the only way we're going to change thoughts and feelings is to use them in a context. And now that's no surprise to social workers. That's what they do anyway, right? Everything is in a context.
Yep.
But the difference with ACT is that context is not just the physical environment, it's also your own history, and your thoughts and your feelings are also part of your context. So if I make that more simple, if I have a thought, I'm bad at sport, that is a contextual factor that influences my ability to play sport. So ACT had this addition of saying, okay, we need to stop saying there's a black and white thinking is good or bad, which is a cognitive approach. Instead, we need to say, how do you use black and white thinking, and when does it help you and when does it not help you? And in which context does it help you and which context doesn't help you? And that was basically kind of, in a nutshell and very crude example, what it's actually changed. Now,
I was going to say, I think that's how I explain it often to clients. I'm like, CBT is very much challenging the negative thought, and ACT is a bit more looking at, it may or may not be true, but is it helpful in this moment?
Yeah, you say it much more simply than I did, which is really good. But the reason I laughed when you asked me is we're getting to the stage now where there's a really nice next level, a merger happening, and the latest work is merging ACT and CBT together into process-based work, which is a really nice advancement. So Steve Hayes is doing a lot of that writing and of putting the best parts of cognitive therapy and the best parts of ACT and putting them together. And so in the next 5 years, there's going to be some changes in the language, and most of that language change is going to be using process-based therapy.
Sounds exciting.
Very exciting.
So ACT uses mindfulness and being in the present moment a lot, and that's a buzzword that I think has been maybe distorted over time. So how does ACT use mindfulness, and what's the context that it puts in that?
Well, you're right about mindfulness being distorted over time. It's really hard to even know what mindfulness is. in the way it's used in common language today. It's used everywhere. And you can get mindfulness of some things that are just make you laugh. I can't think of the examples right now, but it's like, but there's different definitions of mindfulness. So what we're talking about in the way we use ACT with young people is being able to help people be aware of their thoughts and then choose how to respond to them. That's awareness of thoughts and mindfulness of thoughts. We use mindfulness of your body, being aware of your body, being able to understand the messages inside your body and being able to choose how you respond to it. And then we also use mindfulness of being aware of your actions, thinking about your actions and being able to choose what you do. So we use mindfulness broadly, as you'll hear the flavour is awareness, is being able to actually be aware. So we extend it beyond something that people might consider mindfulness as synonymous with meditation, sitting and being aware of your breath coming in and out. So we use a more broader definition of mindfulness, and that is being able to be aware of everything that's happening to you and then letting go of the fight with that and instead just being able to choose what you do.
Do you find some people really struggle with that concept because they would rather just fight the, let's say, anxiety or the fear and be like, I shouldn't be anxious, instead of just really struggling with that just idea of sitting with it and that just discomfort in exploring it and being curious with the emotion?
Yeah, totally. And there's so many layers inside this, Marie, is that culturally we learn to fight ourselves. And so the central part of ACT, which is really one of the most beautiful pieces, and when you work with a person, if you can help them in this piece, is learning that there is no fight, right? And that if you are fighting your feelings, for example, you won't win. Not that we would tell that to a client, because you can't tell somebody, we have to show them the way, right? And so fighting ourselves is often where we end up needing to see a professional or needing help, because we just are stuck in this, I can't have this feeling. And as soon as you get stuck in that I can't have something inside you, you end up in a battle. And if you if you think about it, your dog is not doing this, right? If your dog is sleepy, he's not battling himself and going, I can't be sleepy because I actually need to go and dig all those holes and I can't sleep right now, right?
I wish you would say that. I wish you would have a bit more thought before digging all those holes.
Yeah. So we've set ourselves up culturally and through our learning histories, and also part of our humanity, to learn how to try to fight what is really a process of where there should be no fight.
Sounds like a challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. Well, when I do my training, because we begin developmentally and we start from like birth, I often talk about a little baby. When we're first born, like if a little baby is given a bath and they're screaming because they don't like being cold and uncomfortable, they're just cold and uncomfortable. They're not crying and being cold and uncomfortable and thinking, why was I born into this family, right? They just have that discomfort, but there's nothing else. And eventually, as we grow, we learn to fight that discomfort a better way to learn and grow is to understand that discomfort is not something you want and not pleasant, and no one likes it, but there is no fight in it.
I think I've seen a really good image, and I don't know if this captures ACT well, but of two different people and one person saying it's raining and they've got the umbrella up, and then the thought bubbles are like, why does it always have to rain? The rain's crap. I'm cold. My feet are wet. I don't want to wear gumboots. And then another person being like, yeah, it's raining.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
It's those extra layers that we put onto it and the meaning we add.
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally right, Marie. It's those extra layers. Now, sometimes we need to fight things, but the fight that we need to make is not inside ourselves.
That's a big challenge.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things we often do with Act First is to get people to see the fight.
How do you do that?
Well, most of us don't even see it because we're so deep inside our culture that we don't realise that actually I'm trying to fight myself to not be sad or to not be angry, or I'm trying to control it is another way of saying it. And most one, anxiety is a good way to say it. I cannot be anxious, right? And we fight ourselves about being anxious.
I think it's hard to kind of do it as an audio. If you had video, you could probably show some people examples of how you would. What's a physical way to replicate letting go of that emotion? Like, do you do imagine you've got something kind of blocking your face and you move it to the side? How would you talk someone through?
Yeah, I can talk you through it. We can do it.
Great. It'd be
And
great
there's
for the
lots of different
listeners.
ways to do it. There are hundreds of different ways to do it.
What are some of your
Hundreds.
favourites?
Okay. So one of my favourites, actually, one of my favourites is we can do, even though you can't see me, right? So even though people are just listening. So if you're listening, what I want you to think about is try and get your body to be in a posture that replicates what your body is like when you're feeling like you're in a struggle, like when you're really anxious or when you're really stressed or when you're really overwhelmed. Just see if you can kind of make your body into that posture. Okay. And just get a sense of what it's like to feel that kind of, this is what I'm like on a day when I'm sitting at my work and I'm really stressed and overwhelmed. Right? And get a sense of all the way it feels all the way through your body. I'll use you as my guide. Have you got me, Marie? Okay. Now, what I want you to do is give yourself a bit of a shake and shake your shoulders. And now what I want you to do instead is I want you to get a sense of what your body is like when you're having a day when you feel like you're on top of it. And just see if you can kind of move your shoulders around and get your body to kind of feel a sense of what it's like when you're that on top of it day. And just see if you can bring that into your body so you've got it all. And notice what your chest is like and what it feels like. Okay, and give that a shake out. And tell me what happened to you, Marie.
It does feel a bit defeating going into that position of, when you're not doing so well, and you can feel that shift as you picture what it's like when you're in a happy mood, or feel that kind of, success. It's a more open body posture.
Yeah. Now, the important thing is neither of those are wrong, right? Neither of those are wrong. So helping you to increase your awareness around it kind of gives you some choice. And there's no fight. There's no message here that says don't do that stressed out or hunched over your desk posture. It's just about being able to start bringing into your awareness, well, how am I right now? And a really anxious person might be really fighting that kind of, I don't want to feel like this, I want to be happy, as they sit over their desk, pounding away on the computer. Right? So helping people see the range can be really useful. But there is never, ever a fight inside it.
What are some of the common things that people resist in that? I mean, I've had a few clients, especially when it's something like anger, and they have then a choice on how to respond. They still really get hooked on that idea of, but I was wronged. This shouldn't have happened, instead of being able to say, I can see I'm angry, and then choose how to act. They really just think, I shouldn't be angry. It was done to me. That person deserved it.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that you're describing in there. It's really interesting. Is the first thing is when it comes to feelings, feelings are what they are. Right? And so we give anger a bad rap. We kind of set it up in this culture as if anger is a bad thing. Right? Now, anger is a message in your body. And so mostly anger is a message that something made you feel unsafe. Often it's a message about safety. Not always. Learning changes it. But often there's a message that I don't feel safe. Particularly for women, I will add that. Or I don't feel safe, or it could be a message that that someone is not looking out for me or caring for me, or that someone's going to attack me. So anger is just kind of a message in your body that I don't feel right. And so what we do is we try to get angry to lash out, to try to get away the danger. Right. So anger inside our bodies is a message. So then our job is to think about what that message is, right? So I'm using a general thing about saying I don't feel safe, or you're not thinking about me, you're thinking about yourself, right? So once we know it's a message, then our next job is to think about how we use that message. And so when people start blaming other people, like it's your fault, you shouldn't have done this to me, that's adding that cognitive component, the thought component that we add to blame and judgment and evaluations of other people can sometimes be a way of kind of justifying why I feel like this. And sometimes that's perfectly justified. But we want to get some flexibility inside the way we use our thoughts, like it's their fault or they did that. We don't want to fight with a client because there's no fight in here. Especially when it comes with thoughts. If you fight another person's thoughts, you won't really win. We call it your advisor. When we use it with young people, we call it your advisor. So, which is like a way of saying the way you talk to yourself and tell yourself what to do. It's like you have this internal advisor that says, Marie, do this. Marie, do that. Marie, you need to do this. So if you start blaming other people, like, they shouldn't have done this to me. With a young person, I would say, well, what's your advisor trying to do there? Like, what do you think why do you think that you would be giving yourself advice like it's their fault? And it helps you kind of protect yourself. And now our job when we give ourselves advice, like I think this is this, or I think this is that, is to know whether we're giving ourselves advice that's useful to us. And useful means, does it help you do the things you care about?
So how do you work out what people care about? Because I think that's one big component that a lot of the other maybe types of therapy don't focus on as heavily, is really honing in on your values in different areas of your life. Otherwise, it's really hard to then know which behaviors to change and challenge or adapt if you're not sure exactly which direction you're going in.
Yeah, that's a great, values is a central piece of ACT work, and a core component of the work that we do, because the research shows that helping people to get connected with what they care about, or values, if you want to use that word, actually changes behaviour. It's a really important thing. And you think of it, if you have someone who's experienced a very painful event, like a past trauma, for example, and I don't want to make light of trauma, but it's a good way to kind of think of the example. Like someone who's had a traumatic experience and they've learned something from that, and they use that as a way of making sense of why they're doing the next thing, right? Like, I've learned from this and I want to help other people, right? That's making meaning from pain. That's what values is about. Making meaning from our lives, not just from pain, but also from making meaning in our lives all the time. So it's a driver, right? So let's use the anger example. So if a client has lots of anger and you started to talk about the messages in your body and they understood that this was a message. Now, what is that message about? In terms of what you care about, what is the message telling you? And the message might be that somebody I care about is not thinking about me, or it might be that the message might be that actually I really care about this person and my anger is a learned behaviour that is not helping me with, connecting with this person. And then when you have thoughts like, it's their fault, like what is that kind of thought actually doing to what you care about here? Right? It might be protecting you from this person who's going to cause you harm, and self-care is something that you care about. Or it might be a thought that is actually about being right, but it's pushing away the value of the person you care about. So the hardest thing to get inside this is there's no right or wrong. There's only, how does this work for you?
Mm. Do you find some people who've been in therapy a little while find this approach quite difficult to grasp, because it can be opposite of some of the other things they might have been taught, especially if they're doing very strict work around, I just don't want to feel the anxiety, I want to get rid of it, I just need to, and this is sitting with it, explore it, where do you feel it, what's anxiety like, can you do it anyway, is that okay? Like, how do you find people respond to this who maybe have had other types of treatment?
Well, that's a great thing to think about. And sometimes people come to ACT after they've had lots of other treatment. And that was particularly the common thing that would happen in the early days, when we were doing ACT in the early days. And so one of the foundation pieces of ACT is helping people to think about, one of the foundations pieces that we would start with ACT is technically called doing a functional assessment, but it's often taught as creative hopelessness, which is kind of a weird word. People get stuck on that weird word, hopeless. But creative hopelessness. So I might say to you, so what have you tried so far? Right? And we would talk about it, not in a right or wrong way, but just talk about it and explore. Okay, so I've tried this to stop my anxiety, and I've tried this to stop my anxiety. And then I would ask you, if you were my client, to go, well, what successes have you had? What's worked in here and what hasn't? Right? Now, the ultimate proof is in the pudding. If you're here to see me, clearly then all of the things that you've tried so far, they haven't really worked. Now, they haven't worked because then it's not because you haven't tried hard enough or because you're doing the wrong therapy. They haven't worked because the agenda is wrong. And so if your agenda is, I need to get rid of anxiety, then it's the agenda that's wrong. And so our agenda in the work we do in ACT is, how do I live with my anxiety and do the things I care about?
So what about when people say, but I just don't want anxiety, doesn't belong here?
Great. We can do that work. When they say, I just don't want anxiety, I want to make it go away. Well, we can practice making it go away and see what happens. And we can also practice. Let's say this is your anxiety. I've got my phone here. Let's say this is your anxiety. And we put it in your pocket and we practice doing that next thing while it's in your pocket. Can you do that? Right? Because see, there's a fundamental problem here is anxiety, although we hate it, its foundation is a keep you alive message. Right? And if I was to, so I sometimes do this with my teenagers, I sometimes say, just imagine that I was to wipe anxiety away from you so that you leave my clinic and you never feel anxious again. Right? What would that be like? And of course, they'll often say, well, that would be amazing. It's just what I want, right? But let's just imagine what would actually happen if you're able to walk out of here and you don't feel anxiety ever. It would be great. You'd be calm and chilled and relaxed. Now, Marie, my clinic is on a really busy road, right? And it is. And I say to the teenagers, what do you think would happen if you left? And you're just calm and chilled and relaxed. What do you think they say? Or
Hit
what
by
would
a
you
car.
say?
Well,
Totally.
yeah.
Hit by a car. Right. So anxiety is not the enemy. And you might have too much of it. So our job would be to work out how to live with it. And maybe we need to titrate it down a little bit. But anxiety is not the enemy. Right? And anxiety has a message inside it that says you care about it. One of my favourite things is, tell me something that you perhaps don't really care about ever doing, Marie, like stamp collecting. Do you care about stamp collecting?
No.
No, with apologies to people who love stamp collecting.
Yes, no offence. I did collect them as a child. I don't know why. Maybe it was cooler back then, but no, I'm not into stamp collecting at the moment.
Right. So, Marie, if you get to the very end of your days and you've never, ever had the opportunity to stamp collect, what do you think that will be like? Like when you're on your deathbed and you've never been able to stamp collect?
Well, it wouldn't have an impact for me personally because it was not something I aimed to do or...
Right.
Yeah.
So, exactly. So the amount of anxiety you have around never having the opportunity to stamp collect? Zero. Right. But if instead I said, well, Marie, what about this thing that you actually care about? Like, I'll just use a general one. Let's say it's being loved, if I'm able to use that. Right? Being able to be loved by family, friends. You know, I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about being connected with people. Let's say that's something you really care about. Right? How much anxiety do you feel about the idea of not getting that?
I'd be soul destroying.
Yeah, right.
Almost like paralyzingly anxiety provoking.
Yeah. So inside anxiety is something you care about. If you don't care about it, there is no anxiety.
Yeah, I used that example for something like a job interview. So if you don't really care about the job and you're not really anxious about it, you might not prepare, you might not iron your clothes the day before or check the timetable for the trains or buses. And if you care a lot that you're starting to feel anxious, it's showing you that it's important or you want to do well, and it gives you a bit of a kick up the bum to prepare and practice. And then too much anxiety is when you're so anxious you don't show up to the interview because it's just controlled you, and we need that middle bit.
Yeah, absolutely, we need it. Now, some people end up with find themselves in places where they're, for whatever reason, whether it's temperament or their physiology or their learning history, that they find that they feel more anxious in their bodies, and it's really hard to have those feelings. And so what we want to do is separate the two things. There's anxiety in your body, and then there is the fight to not have anxiety in your body. So there's those two things, right? So there's anxiety in your body, we might call that anxiety. And then there's anxiety about anxiety, which is don't feel this. I can't feel this. This is really bad, right? And the anxiety in your body, although it's unpleasant and no one likes it, there are things that you can do with your body to help you. But anxiety about anxiety is a fight that you won't win, because you're basically trying to tell your body to stop doing what it's doing.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
So we could talk forever about anxiety. So if people want to learn more, then there's a few books that you've got and one up and coming, so we can put links to those in the show notes. Where can people who might be interested in learning a bit more about Learning Act, so more for practitioners, where can they go? What's available? What populations can they use it with?
Okay, so I'll answer backwards. What populations can they use it with? There are over 300 randomised controlled trials of using ACT now, and it's being used with pretty much every population you can think of. Because it's transdiagnostic, because its foundation is how do you suffer, right? Or what are you struggling with and how do I help you, right? So in terms of training, there's lots of different ways to get training, and so I'll give myself a plug, because I can, is if you can go to my website, louisehayes.com.au, and I run regular training workshops. And you can also go to our other website, thrivingadolescent.com, where you can get some free resources and downloads and learn about how to do it developmentally. So that's thrivingadolescent.com. And we have an overarching organisation called the Association for Contextual Behavioural Science. And we have members of all disciplines in there. We have a special interest group for social workers as well. And so we have an Australian chapter, and they have training, and their training is often quite cheap, like webinars for $20. So it's a good way to get some low-cost training. And they often have student days, which are really good too, where you can go along as a student. You might pay, like I'm guessing, $100 and get great training for a day. So that website is ANZACBS, which is Australian New Zealand Association for Contextual Behavioural Science. So that's another good way. And then
Great.
Russ Harris does lots of training in Australia too.
Yeah, excellent. So I'll put some of those links in the show notes. Anything people should be aware of if they're starting to go down this path of learning a bit more about ACT to work with their clients? Any sort of trigger warnings, or do they have to do the work themselves? What are kind of things people need to know?
Yeah, well, the first thing I thought when you said any warnings, the first thing is you cannot tell ACT to clients. You have to do it, right? If you just tell them, oh, I don't think like that, or, tell them a metaphor, for example, doesn't actually work, right? You have to experience it, right? Because telling you to think differently is not going to make you think differently. Allowing you to experience, give you the opportunity of thinking in a different way, right, might actually allow you to see something different. And that's what we know from the research. So you have to experience it. So I say, do it, don't talk about it. Like I asked you to move your body to different positions instead of telling you to do it, like telling you what it would mean. So that's it. And so that's an important thing. And I've learned lots of lessons along the way learning about this, is you've got to step up and do the weird experience you learned in a workshop and actually discover for yourself what it means. And if you find when you do that experience in a workshop and you go, oh, that made me feel really uncomfortable, great, because that's exactly how your clients are going to feel. Right? And you learn that way. In the end, the most important message in ACT is we're all the same here.
Excellent. That's lovely. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for your time. It was nice to meet you, Marie.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Inside Social Work podcast. So all of Louise's resources can be found at www.louisehayes.com. If you're in Melbourne, you can check out some of the training that she's running. She also runs some across different states in Australia, which is really cool. And you can check out her books, The Thriving Adolescent, and Get the Most Out of Your Mind and Get Into Your Life for Teens. You can find them online in bookstores, and there's a bit more information about those resources on her website. So thanks for listening. Have a really lovely day and get in touch. Don't forget to join the mailing list, and you can get your copy of the Social Work Career Guide, and you can do that by going to the website www.insidesocialwork.com. Join the Facebook group, contribute some stuff, have a chat. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode's resources, and don't forget to click subscribe and review us wherever it is you get your podcast.